Now Kurt's going to bring the message. Okay, so tonight I'm going to be talking about mostly how Satan, his main tactic to take the Christian part of the youth part of our Christian body, and how he does it mainly is, they're Christians, so they're not just going to fall straight into some huge sin that we call them the huge sins. So what God does is he gets them to just want a little bit of a taste. And one thing leads to another, and when you give Satan an inch, he'll take a mile. So that's basically what I'm going to be talking about tonight. And I'm going to be talking about Samson. And I don't have any main passage of scripture, because if I did, it would take all night, because Samson's story goes about 3 chapters long. But backstory of Samson, he was one of the mighty men in the Bible whose mission was foretold before he was ever born. His mother was barren, but an angel appeared to her and said that she would give birth to a son, and that he would be a Nazirite all his life. And a Nazirite means that you can't have any alcohol, and you can't cut your hair or your beard for your entire life. And Samson was called by God to be the kind of warrior that shook the gates of hell. And Samson led Israel's army for 20 years. And in chapter 4 of Judges, the story is told of how Samson ripped a lion apart with his bare hands. And it also tells the story of him killing 30 Philistines at Askelon. And in the next chapter, he was mad at the Philistines because they took his wife. So hothead Samson, what he did was he caught 300 foxes, which I guess he was more than super strong. He had to be super fast to do that, because I know I couldn't. And he caught 300 foxes, and he tied them tail to tail, and he lit them on fire, and he set them loose in the Philistines' crops to burn up all their crops. And the Philistines saw this, and they got even more mad, so they killed his wife. And boy, was that stupid. Because after that, he killed 1,000 of them with a jawbone of a donkey. And that's the kind of power that this man had. But similar to many of the warriors in the Bible, the men of God warriors in the Bible, he had some issues that held him back from being all that he could be in the Lord. And one of those was he was arrogant. Another was that he was easily angered, which, as you can tell in the last story I just told, because that wasn't God's will for Samson right there. That wasn't something that he did for the Lord. He was just angry. And another was that he was tempted by women. And one day, he stayed the night with a prostitute, and the Philistines noticed his weakness was women. So they got a woman. Well, no, Samson was already married to Delilah, but they told Delilah, we'll pay you if you get Samson to tell you where his strength lies so you can take it from him so we can keep him prisoner. And you would think that this goofball would realize that when Delilah said, where does your strength lie, she was really saying, how can I take your strength? So he must not have been super intelligent, because he didn't take that hint. But so Delilah says, Samson, please tell me what makes you so strong and what it would take to tie you up securely. And Samson replied, if I were tied up with 7 new bowstrings that have not yet been dried, I would become as weak as any other man. So Delilah, in his sleep, tied him up with 7 new bowstrings that had not yet been dried. And when he woke up, she said, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. Tried to make it look like, they just came in there. She had nothing to do with it. Again, the goofball didn't realize anything was going on. And she told the Philistines they tried it. They tried to seize him. And Samson just broke out of it. So Delilah knew that he lied to him. She asked him again. He said, if I were tied up with brand new ropes that had never been used, I would become as weak as any other man. So, same thing happens. Philistine tried to seize him up with that in his sleep, and it didn't work. He just tore out of it. And Delilah said, you've been making fun of me and telling me lies. Now tell me how you can be tied up securely. And Samson replied, if you were to weave the 7 braids of my hair into the fabric on your loom and tighten it with the loom shuttle, I would become as weak as any other man. Again, it didn't work. So Delilah asked him again. She said, How can you tell me I love you when you don't share your secrets with me? You've made fun of me 3 times, and you still haven't told me what makes you so strong. Finally, Samson shared his secret. His hair had never been cut because he was dedicated to God as a Nazarite from birth, and if his head was shaved, his strength would leave him, and he would become as weak as any other man. So this time, Delilah cut his hair in his sleep, and his strength was gone, and they took him prisoner. So the gist of the stories that I just told you is Samson was playing with Delilah, and he became a prisoner with what he was playing with. So you think that you can dance around in the gray area and do things that are not really that bad, and you think that you're too Christian and you won't fall into the sin, but that's not how it works. Because just because we're Christians does not make us any less susceptible to falling into sin. It just means we're smart enough to stay away from it a little more. But sometimes we want to get a little bit of a taste. And that's not just our young people, that's a sermon for everybody. And, like I said, you can't dance around in that gray area because everything you do is either feeding your flesh or it's feeding the spirit. It's not just a show, it's not just a song, it's not just a Facebook video. Everything you do is either tearing you down or building you up. And a couple months ago, I had the thought pattern that I don't really listen to bad music, but if probably some of the people in the church went through my playlist, they would probably think this is probably some bad music. So the Lord spoke to me one day and he said, so how do you, what's your standard on what's bad and what's not? And I was like, you're right, Lord. I heard him speaking to me. So I went through my playlist and I just deleted every song that had a cuss word in it, which was super hard for me because y'all know music is my thing. But I did it anyway. And when I stepped out in faith and did that for God, he showed me that whenever you set the boundaries, which is the title of my message, whenever you set the boundaries and you don't give Satan anything, that's whenever God can take you to the higher levels that he has called you to be. And so many times we wonder why we don't feel close to God as we should. Well, like Brother Michael touched on this morning, sometimes we're in a great service and everybody else is falling out in the spirit and stuff, and we're just sitting there like we're feeling nothing. And probably the reason is because God does not negotiate and he does not compromise, and if you don't give him his all, if you don't give him your all, he won't give you anything. And we keep thinking that we're not going to give it all and we're just going to dabble in sin, and that's not how Jesus rolls. And he will never take you to the higher places that he is trying to ascend you to if you don't give him all that you have. And also, there's a lot of words that aren't necessarily cuss words, but you wouldn't say them in church. And this is honestly another thing the Lord showed me. I know Brother Randy isn't the Lord, but obviously he's somebody that I value spiritually. So I'd say something that wasn't a cuss word, but the Lord would say, would you say that if you were around Brother Randy? So I just cut out everything like that. I mean, you can't dance around in the gray area. You can't, if you had to think about whether or not it's bad, it's bad. Okay, and when you give God everything, that's when he'll take you to the higher levels. And 1 Peter 5:8-9 says, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about roaring like a lion, seeking whom he may devour. Resist him, steadfast in the faith, knowing that the sufferings are experienced by your brotherhood in the world. Guys, we have to be on the lookout for Satan's tricks. We have to be sober and we have to be vigilant. One of my favorite characters in the Bible, probably my favorite character in the Bible was David. David was a musician, a singer, a warrior, a king, and a kingdom builder. And because David didn't set boundaries, he lost his throne and did not fulfill his potential because he didn't set boundaries. I think Brother Josh touched up on this one time, and he said whenever David pursued Delilah, it probably wasn't an overnight thing. It's probably drawn out. He probably saw her bathing on a rooftop one day, and he just took a little peek, and he felt bad about it, so he looked away. Next time, he probably looked a little longer until he just was eaten up by temptation. And because he didn't set the boundary, he lusted with her. And that even led to him murdering her husband. I mean, every single thing that you do. I preached on a sermon one time and I said, sin takes you further than you want to stay, makes you pay more than you wanted to, something like that. You get the point. Don't sin, okay? You know, sin will always take you further than you want to go. You can't say because I'm a good Christian that if I just dabble in it, it's not going to overtake me. That's not how sin works. Because if sin was that easy to get away from, we'd all be Christians. And I'm sure that when David looked once or twice, he thought it was harmless, but that's how the enemy gets us. It's the little things. We have to be willing to give God our all, and we have to set the boundaries and separate ourselves from things that don't feed our spirit. And that is whenever God is going to elevate us to the next level. Can everybody stand on their feet with me tonight? Join with me in prayer. God, I thank you for the word, and I ask that it would have just pierced the ears of the people you wanted it to hear, God, and just do in their lives what you wanted it to do, God. Thank you for making me a vessel and speaking through me, because none of that was my words, God. And I thank you for your spirit in this service, God. And I ask that you would just show us that if we set the boundaries, we can be everything that you have called us to be, God. We can ascend to those higher levels, and we can become the man of God or the woman of God that you have called us to be. And God, I thank you for each and everything you've done in our lives tonight. I pray for traveling graces as we go home. In your name I pray. Amen. Is Brother BJ supposed to dismiss, or am I just... Okay, because I pretty much just did a dismissal prayer, so... Sorry for taking your job, but... consider yourselves dismissed.